It happened on a Friday afternoon, just a few hours before we were supposed to leave for my birthday weekend in Santa Fe. The bags were already packed. The route was set. Madison had even gone as far as booking dinner reservations at a restaurant she described as quaint but sophisticated, which usually meant linen napkins and 2 small portions. It was the kind of gesture that looked great on social media, pictures under patio lights, clinking wine glasses, matching outfits. All surface, but I told myself not to nitpick. Maybe I was just being cynical. I was in the kitchen loading the last of the drinks into the cooler when I heard her call down from upstairs. "Babe, can you grab my green tote from the bedroom? I think I dropped my earring in there." I wiped my hands on a towel and made my way upstairs. Madison had been in a bit of a frenzy for the past half hour, muttering to herself about losing one of her gold hoops, the ones I bought her last Christmas. They were simple, elegant, the kind of thing she used to wear when she didn't feel like trying too hard. Lately, she always seemed like she was trying too hard. The tote bag was by the dresser, slumped against the leg like it had been tossed there in a hurry. As I picked it up, the contents shifted, and something clattered to the floor. A hotel keycard. I bent down to pick it up. It was plastic, slightly worn, with a small chip on one corner. The logo on it was unfamiliar. A stylized blue pine tree with the words "The Grafton House" beneath it in serif font. I turned it over, hoping maybe there was a date or name on the back, but it was blank, just a keycard. I stood there longer than I needed to, staring at it like it might blink and offer me some kind of explanation. The Grafton House wasn't in Santa Fe, wasn't even local. I remembered it vaguely from a conversation months ago, something about a quaint little inn 2 towns over, tucked in the foothills. She had mentioned it once when talking about a girls' weekend with her book club. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. Madison always kept a rotating cast of friends and plans. Brunches, retreats, art classes she'd never finish. It was part of what made her feel untouchable, almost curated, like living with someone who always had a running photo shoot in the back of her mind. I heard her coming down the hallway before I could put the keycard back in the bag. She peeked into the bedroom, saw me standing there, and froze for just half a second. "Did you find it?" she asked, tone light, like nothing was off. I held up the tote. "Yeah, it was right here." She stepped forward and took it from me, but her eyes went straight to my hand, where I was still holding the keycard. She gave this breathy little laugh, almost a scoff. "Oh, that must have been from the girls' retreat last month. Remember? I lent this bag to Rachel. She probably left it in there." She said it casually, dismissively, but her cheeks flushed slightly. Not full-blown embarrassment, just a hint of something, like she had to remind herself to perform the explanation correctly. Then, almost too quickly, she took the keycard from my hand and zipped the bag shut. "God, this thing is a black hole. I really need to clean it out," she muttered, forcing a laugh again as she slung it over her shoulder and walked out of the room. I followed her downstairs without saying much. I should have said something, anything, but instead I just filed it away. There's something about that kind of moment. A pivot in your relationship where a new version of the story starts writing itself behind your back. You don't realize it right away. You just feel it, like someone tilted the floor a few degrees and everything started sliding. The drive to Santa Fe was quiet. She was on her phone most of the time, scrolling, texting, swiping through Instagram stories. I tried to make small talk, asked about her coworkers, mentioned a podcast I'd been meaning to play on the road. She smiled, nodded, responded politely, but her attention was miles away. At one point, I glanced over and noticed she was typing something fast, fingers flying across the screen, then deleting, typing again. She caught me looking and tilted the screen toward her lap. "Just Rachel being dramatic about her new apartment," she said. I nodded, but Rachel never texts her in paragraphs. That night, at the restaurant, surrounded by soft lighting and friends who made toasts about how lucky I was to have Madison, she was radiant. She wore a black wrap dress and a pair of heels I hadn't seen before. When she spoke, people leaned in. When she laughed, they joined her. She gave a toast for my birthday, perfectly timed, with just the right amount of nostalgia and warmth to make the room applaud. It was everything a person would want their partner to say about them. And yet I felt like a stand-in, like I had been invited to my own life as a guest, not a participant. I kept going over the scene in the bedroom, the way she looked at that keycard, the way she deflected without skipping a beat. The thing is, Madison never lent her bags out. She always said people ruined the shape. And Rachel? She hates driving through the foothills. She told me that herself. But in that moment, at that dinner, I was handed a role. Devoted husband, birthday boy, grateful partner. The script was simple. Smile, nod, kiss her hand when she leans in, say thank you when everyone cheers. I played along. But the performance didn't quite reach me. It hovered just above my head, like a movie I'd seen before and couldn't suspend disbelief for anymore. Later that night, in our hotel room, she curled up beside me, her head on my chest. She sighed in that exaggerated way she does when she wants me to think she's relaxed. "Did you have a good day?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I said. "It was a lot." She laughed gently. "Well, that's what happens when people love you." I kissed the top of her head, but my eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. Something about that phrase, "when people love you," felt pointed, like reassurance wrapped in guilt. She fell asleep quickly, breathing softly beside me. I lay there for what felt like hours, my mind running through timelines, trying to piece things together. I thought about how she had been carrying that tote the weekend before, how I had seen her toss it in the trunk of her car after yoga, how she insisted I not help her carry it. I thought about the Grafton house. I thought about the book club retreat that never had photos. Madison documents everything. Every charcuterie board, every flower arrangement, every girl in matching robes. But that weekend, not a single post. When I asked how it went, she said it was relaxing, then changed the subject. That was 3 weeks ago. The next morning, over breakfast at a cafe with overpriced omelets and pour-over coffee, she was back in full host mode, thanking the waiter with smiles, posing us for a selfie she would later caption with something like, "Still swooning over this guy." I watched her from across the table and wondered how many versions of herself she kept ready, tucked away like dresses in a closet. She looked up and smiled at me. "What?" she asked. I shook my head. "Nothing. Just glad to be here." It wasn't a lie. I was glad to be here, because now, finally, I was paying attention. Looking back, I should have seen it sooner. The signs weren't subtle, they were practically scripted. Like the kind of red flags you scoff at in movies, the ones you're sure you'd never ignore in real life. Except I did. I ignored all of them. And not because I was naive or stupid or blind, but because I wanted to believe Madison. I needed to. After Santa Fe, things didn't settle. If anything, they got quieter. Too quiet. We went back to our routines, work, errands, the occasional dinner with friends. But something about her felt removed. Like someone who had left the room and forgotten to take her body with her. Her smiles were still there, but they didn't reach her eyes. Her voice hit the right notes, but there was no harmony underneath. It was like living with a well-rehearsed hologram. She stopped leaving her phone lying around. That used to be a small but steady comfort. Seeing it tossed on the kitchen island or plugged into the charger by the bed, unattended. Now it was always on her. If she left a room, so did the phone. If she set it down, it was face down. Always on silent. Always dimmed. I didn't bring it up at first. I told myself people get protective of their phones. It's normal. Everyone values privacy. But it wasn't privacy. It was a partition. She also started going on these long walks at night. Said they helped her clear her head. At first, I thought nothing of it. Madison had always been the type to romanticize solo time, journaling, yoga, tea by the window. But now the walks stretched past an hour. Sometimes 2. And when she got back, she wasn't refreshed. She was distracted. I'd ask her how the walk was, and she'd mumble something vague, eyes already drifting toward her phone. I asked once, lightly, "You ever bring headphones? Listen to music or a podcast?" She blinked, then said, "Oh, yeah, sometimes." But she didn't ask why I asked. She didn't engage. just turned the question over in her head and put it down like it didn't interest her. She used to care about those details. Now it felt like everything between us had been reduced to polite transactions. Then there were the excuses, one after the other, stacking like cheap furniture. She missed our monthly movie night, said she got held up at work. Her texts were short, clipped. Sorry babe, swamped. Rain check. I waited with takeout and a bottle of wine, watching the food go cold. She came home smelling like peppermint and musk. Not her perfume. Not mine. Another night, she canceled dinner with my parents. Claimed a migraine, but then I saw a story posted by Rachel Madison at a bar, laughing with a group I didn't recognize. She saw me looking at it later and said it was an old photo Rachel reposted for memories. I nodded. I even said, makes sense. But it didn't. And I think she knew that I knew. We were locked in a cold war of subtle lies and quieter suspicions. Neither of us willing to break the silence first. The real fracture came on our anniversary. Not a major milestone, just 6 years, but we'd always made a thing out of it. Little traditions. First coffee together, handwritten notes, a dinner reservation at whichever spot felt meaningful that year. This time she forgot the coffee. Left before I even woke up. No note. No mention of plans. I tried to play it cool. Texted her mid-morning, happy anniversary. Hope we get to celebrate tonight. She replied 5 hours later, work crisis. Don't wait up. I'm so sorry. That was it. She came home at 10:43 p.m. carrying a small paper bag gift-wrapped from a gas station, by the looks of it. Inside was a $50 Amazon card. I didn't want to come home empty-handed, she said, sheepish. I looked at the card, then at her. And all I could think was, this is what love looks like when it forgets your name. I didn't argue. Didn't raise my voice. Just nodded and said thanks. I watched her walk upstairs, watched her from the kitchen as she disappeared into the bedroom without even asking how my day was. Later that night, I sat on the back porch and tried to convince myself this was a phase. Maybe work had really become overwhelming. Maybe she was struggling with something personal and didn't know how to say it. Maybe I wasn't doing enough. I ran every version of blame through my head and most of them landed on me. But somewhere deeper under the rationalizations, beneath the hope, I knew something had shifted. And it wasn't temporary. There was a moment a few days later when the veil almost dropped. We were at the grocery store of all places. In line at checkout. I made some dumb joke about the tabloids next to the candy display. Something about how there's always one story about aliens, one about a celebrity marriage falling apart, and one with you won't believe what she looks like now. She laughed. At first, genuinely. Then too much. Too long. Her eyes looked at the tabloids, but her smile cracked midway. When I turned toward her, she was already biting her lip, turning away. I said, you okay? She blinked and nodded too fast. Yeah. Just zoned out. That was her new phrase. Zoned out. She used it every time I caught her staring at nothing, every time her voice flattened or her hands started fidgeting during a conversation. Zoned out. Like her mind had become some distant country with no return flights. She used to talk about everything, her coworkers' drama, the weird things she saw on the street, even the texture of a salad she didn't like. Now silence. And when we did talk, it was rehearsed. Like she was skimming the script of our life together instead of reading it. One night, I asked her directly, are we okay? She paused. Smiled. Of course we are. Then leaned in to kiss me, but it felt like a gesture, not an answer. I nodded. I let it go. But I started paying attention with different eyes. I began noticing what time her phone lit up, how quickly she responded to certain messages. I noticed how she changed her phone's lock screen password after years of sharing everything. I noticed how she started showering at odd hours. How she began keeping her purse zipped even at home. And the worst part? I didn't want to check her phone. I didn't want to dig. Because some part of me already knew what I'd find. Instead, I waited. Observed. Let her think I was still comfortably unaware. Because something told me the truth would present itself, eventually. She was too composed. Too careful. And people who aren't hiding anything don't rehearse honesty. The confirmation came 3 weeks later. Not through a dramatic reveal or some slip of the tongue, but in the middle of a party, my own, no less. Madison had planned it. Orchestrated might be the better word. My birthday had never been much more than a quiet dinner or a weekend getaway. But this year, she went big. Caterers, custom cocktails, string lights in the backyard, even a hired photographer to capture candid moments. It was excessive, theatrical, designed to impress. Or distract. She invited everyone. Friends from work, old classmates, neighbors we only waved to from across the street. It felt more like a networking event than a celebration. But I smiled through it. I always did. She knew I would. By the time the sun dipped low, people were gathered around the fire pit, music playing low, wine flowing. Madison was floating around like she was hosting an awards show. She wore a long, green satin dress, hair pinned back, a sparkle in her eyes that made people fall in love with her on sight. She looked like someone who had it all together. Maybe she did. But even under all that charm, something kept pulling at me. A weight in my chest. Not anxiety, not quite. More like inevitability. She had left her bag near the bar, her new one, the structured leather tote she insisted on carrying everywhere lately. I don't know why I noticed. Maybe because she was always so careful with it. Always zipped. Always close. But tonight, she was careless. Maybe she thought the performance was too good to doubt. I stood nearby, pretending to search for napkins. My fingers moved on instinct. The zipper wasn't even all the way closed. I reached in, not digging, just a glance. Just confirming. What I found wasn't much, but it was everything. A second phone. Smaller than her usual one. Older. I recognized it. She'd had it 2 upgrades ago, said it stopped working, and she'd never bothered to get it fixed. But here it was, powered on, tucked inside the inner pocket like a secret she hadn't meant to leave behind. I didn't unlock it. I didn't need to. The screen lit up with a single notification. Chase, let me know if we're still good for Silverwood next weekend. I'll bring the wine. I stared at it for a moment. Not long. Not dramatically. Just long enough to feel the final piece click into place. Chase. I didn't know a Chase. Silverwood. That was the name of the guest house collection just outside of town. Private. Scenic. Discreet. I slipped the phone back into her bag. Zipped it shut. Walked back to the crowd like nothing had happened. People were laughing. Madison was holding court near the fire pit, retelling the story of our first road trip, embellishing the details just enough to get the room to giggle. And then he turns to me dead serious and says, "Wait, we're not in Nevada yet?" The crowd laughed. I swear, he's adorable, but geography is not his strong suit. I smiled. Raised my glass when someone offered a toast. Nodded when Madison leaned in and kissed my cheek. On the outside, I was the man she described, predictable, patient, a little naive, but endlessly loyal. Inside, I was gone. Fully and finally gone. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't storm off or shout or ask why. Instead, I watched. I watched how she laughed a little too loud. I watched how her eyes never settled on mine. I watched her clutch that bag a little tighter when she finally noticed where I'd been standing. Later, when the guests left and we cleaned up in silence, she leaned against the counter and said, "That went well, huh?" "Yeah," I said, tossing a plastic cup into the trash. "It did." She smiled. "You deserve to feel celebrated." I nodded. She came over and wrapped her arms around me. Rested her head on my shoulder like she used to do when we were first dating. "I love you," she said. And for a moment I hated her for saying it. Not because it wasn't true, but because I think a part of her still believed it. That night I waited until she was asleep. Her breathing evened out fast, probably the wine. I got out of bed quietly, grabbed her tote, and took it into the hallway bathroom. Locked the door. The second phone was still inside. Unlocked now, to my surprise. She hadn't disabled facial recognition. Messages. Dozens of them. All from Chase. Some short, thinking about you. Others longer. Conversations. Inside jokes. In asterisk mate references. There were mentions of hikes they'd gone on. Notes about what wine he preferred. A message about how she looked in that black dress she wore when she pretended to go out with coworkers. Photos. Some of just him. A few selfies of them together, taken indoors, same couch and multiple pictures. Same blue wall behind them. I matched the paint color in my head. Grafton House. And then one photo. The worst one. Not explicit. Not graphic. Just simple. Madison curled into him, no makeup, hair loose, half asleep on his chest. She looked peaceful. Like she belonged there. Like that version of her didn't exist with me. I backed everything up. Took *TS, emailed them to myself from her phone's linked account. She never logged out of anything. I think part of her thought she was invincible. Or maybe she just believed I'd never look. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to her, my back to the wall, listening to her breathe. I wondered if Chase had ever done the same. The next morning, she made coffee like usual. Kissed my cheek. Said she had a call with her boss and would be working from the co-working space in town most of the day. I nodded. Sounds good. She was halfway out the door when I asked, "Hey, quick question. Who's Chase?" The pause was microscopic. A quarter second at most. But I saw it. She turned, her smile already preloaded. Ha! I saw some messages on your other phone. The old one. Thought it wasn't working. Her mouth opened, then closed. Oh, she said, laughing. That? It's nothing. He's just a guy from book club. We all group text sometimes. Rachel told him to message me about an event we're planning. I watched her face. Noted the speed at which she put that together. The confidence. She was good. I nodded. Got it. She studied me for a moment, maybe waiting for the usual sigh, the easy smile, the letting go. But I just stared back. She broke eye contact first. All right, I'll see you later, she said, voice just a little too bright. See you, I replied. And then she left. Just like that. I sat down on the couch, opened my laptop, and pulled up everything I'd backed up. Messages. Photos. Contact info. Geotags. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not angry. Not crying. Just watching the world I'd built tilt sideways. I wasn't heartbroken. Not yet. I was preparing. After that night, after seeing the photos, reading the messages, and hearing her lie with a straight face, something in me clicked. Or maybe it unclicked. I stopped waiting for her to tell the truth. I stopped hoping she'd break down in tears and confess. That moment had passed. Whatever part of Madison once needed my forgiveness had been carefully trained not to want it anymore. She wasn't hiding out of guilt. She was hiding by design. It started with the tech. People forget that convenience betrays more than anything. Autosyncs, saved passwords, old devices left behind, breadcrumbs she probably didn't realize she'd scattered. She thought I wouldn't look. She counted on my trust, on the version of me she had shaped over the years, patient, non-confrontational, agreeable. But that version of me died the second I saw her curled into someone else's chest. While she was out one evening, at yoga, I powered up her old iPad, one she hadn't touched in at least a year. The lock screen still had a photo of us on it, from a winery trip we took 2 summers ago. I almost laughed. She must have forgotten it even existed. It opened right up. No password change. Same Apple ID. And that's when I found the folder. It was tucked away in her notes app, beneath grocery lists and recipe clippings and random half-finished poems. It was labeled innocently enough, Notes for Balance. But when I opened it, I felt my stomach knot. The first note was titled Emotional Distance, Steps and Pacing. It wasn't a journal entry or a stream of consciousness rant. It was structured. Bullet points. Organized. Methodical. Begin with softened language. Normalize absence as self-care. Use wellness framing to mask detachment. Minimize conflict by appearing emotionally overextended. It read less like someone in pain and more like someone programming a behavior. I scrolled further. Another note, narrative control. Use phrases like, I'm rediscovering myself or I'm reclaiming my time. Avoid definitive statements. Keep explanations broad. If caught, steer toward emotional growth themes. Do not use language that sounds rehearsed, very tone. She had rehearsed not just what to say, but how to say it. I found a third note, the one that hollowed me out. It was titled, Preserving Stability During Exploration. Keep primary partner emotionally secure. Avoid drastic changes in Macy, decrease gradually. Maintain joint calendar appearances. Schedule solo outings in recurring patterns, book club, walks, etc. There were dates next to each bullet. Timestamps. Notes on what worked and what needed tweaking. It was an experiment. A goddamn science project. And I was the control variable. I don't know how long I sat there reading. My eyes stopped seeing the words after a while. I felt like I was reading instructions for how to dismantle a person while keeping them just intact enough to function. And I had followed them all without question. One note buried further down wasn't structured like the rest. It was messier, less polished, but it cut the deepest. Chase has a softness that doesn't ask for permission. He makes me feel like I never needed to ask for space just to take it. With Mark, everything feels like a negotiation. With Chase, it feels like a return. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the iPad. I just sat there, stunned by how small she had made me inside her new world. I backed everything up again. *TS. Copies. Stored on multiple drives. I even printed the most damning notes and tucked them into a file folder labeled Tax Docs just in case she ever got curious. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it all yet, but I knew better than to confront her now. This wasn't the part where I asked why. I already knew why. This was the part where I stopped being a bystander in my own life. In the days that followed, I paid attention like I was undercover. Madison's patterns didn't just make sense now, they felt choreographed. She used the exact phrases from her notes. When she declined dinner, she said, "I'm just feeling a little emotionally foggy tonight." When she left for her solo hike, she said, "I need to ground myself in quiet." I almost wanted to applaud. She didn't stumble. Not once. She'd built herself a script and memorized it. But what she hadn't accounted for was that I'd stopped playing my part. I didn't push back when she made excuses. I didn't ask where she was going or when she'd be back. I gave her exactly what she claimed to want, space. And in doing so, I got something back: time. Time to gather, to observe, to prepare. One morning, while she was in the shower, her laptop was left open on the kitchen counter. I sat down like I was checking the weather and went into her downloads folder. There were PDFs, lots of them. Articles with titles like "The Psychology of Non-Monogamy, Maintaining Marital Peace While Exploring Autonomy and Intentional Separation, a New Model for Long-Term Relationships." But none of these bothered me half as much as a PowerPoint deck I found titled "Identity in Transition, Talking Points." It was a presentation. 15 slides. Custom designed. Slide 1, Moving Beyond Binary Roles, Redefining Love on Your Terms. Slide 2, Step 1, Create Emotional Language Shields. Say, "I'm evolving," not "I'm unhappy." Slide 3, If partner reacts with anger or suspicion, do not counter. Validate their pain, then recenter on your growth. She had downloaded it 3 days after our Santa Fe trip. The file name suggested it was from a digital workshop. I checked the link in the metadata. A private forum. Members only. And Madison had a username. I searched it. The same handle showed up in cached pages linked to discussion threads. She had been a regular contributor. Offering advice. Sharing templates. Responding to other users struggling with similar dual-life transitions. In one post, she described how her anchor partner, that would be me, provided stability and security, while her exploratory connection, Chase, brought liberation and alignment. She ended the post with, "The key is to never let your two selves collapse into one. When your roles blur, you lose both relationships. Keep the lines clean." Ritualized detachment. Ritualized detachment. I whispered it aloud to myself, over and over, until the words stopped sounding human. That night, she came home late. Said she lost track of time. Kissed my cheek. Made tea. I looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered how long she'd been gone. Not physically. Spiritually. Emotionally. Madison hadn't left me. She had replaced me. And she had done it so carefully that I almost didn't notice the handoff. I didn't confront Madison right away. That was never going to work. You don't walk into a performance mid-scene and demand the actors drop their lines. No, if I was going to do this, it had to be on my terms. Quiet. Measured. Surgical. So I waited. Days passed. A week. I played along. I smiled when she told me about her book club girls and nodded when she said she was really craving alone time lately. I let her think the fog she'd planted around me was still doing its job. That I was still stumbling in it. Still following. But I wasn't. I was watching her build a house of cards with shaking hands. I compiled everything. The photos. The messages. The synced notes from her tablet. Her digital forum posts. Printouts. Timestamps. Location history. I built a timeline. I organized it by month, then week, then day. I even added a section with direct quotes, her own words lifted from text messages and forum replies. Words like emotional bifurcation and domestic role stability. Words no one would use unless they were actively detaching with intention. I stored it all on a hard drive, backed it up on the cloud, then printed a slim, curated copy. I didn't want quantity, I wanted clarity. A tight, undeniable proof of betrayal. Not just of an ** Macy, but of identity. Of design. And when the night finally came, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I set the stage the same way she taught me. Controlled. Curated. She came home from her co-working space around 6:30. Tossed her keys on the table, kicked off her flats, then headed to the fridge. Long day, she sighed, pulling out a bottle of wine. "Want to split this?" "Sure," I said, without looking up from the kitchen table. I had the file folder in front of me, unopened. The evidence sat like an artifact between us, glowing invisible. She poured 2 glasses and sat down across from me, legs tucked under her like she always did when she wanted to seem relaxed. "What's that?" she asked, nodding toward the folder. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't flinch when her eyes met mine. She smiled, tentative, unsure. "You okay?" I nodded once. "Yeah, I am now." She cocked her head. "You're being weird." I slid the folder across the table to her. "What's this?" "Open it." She hesitated, then flipped it open. The first page was a **T of one of her forum posts, dated, with her username visible. As her eyes scanned it, the smile on her face unraveled. Page 2, a transcript of a message to Chase, complete with geotag metadata. Page 3, an annotated list of her notes for balance with highlights matching dates she claimed to be elsewhere. By page 4, she had stopped pretending. Her mouth opened slightly. Not in surprise, more like calculation. Like someone searching for a clean starting point. Mark? Don't, I said quietly. Just, don't. She closed the folder slowly, set it down. Took a long breath. Sat up straighter. This isn't what you think, she said. I let out the smallest laugh. That's page 6. What? You said that exact phrase to Chase. October 9th. He asked if I was getting suspicious. You said, and I quote, it's not what he thinks. Her mouth opened again, but nothing came out. I continued. I know about the Grafton house. I know about Silverwood. I know about the second phone, the hidden accounts, the forum posts. I know about your emotional bifurcation strategy, and I know about the playbook you've been running since April. She sat back in her chair like I'd pushed her. You've been reading my personal notes? I read the plan you wrote for detaching from your husband without triggering alarm. The one where you described me as your anchor partner and Chase as your liberation model. You didn't just betray me, Madison. You studied how to do it effectively. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for her wine. She didn't drink it. Just held it. I wasn't trying to hurt you. No, I said. That's the problem. You were trying not to feel anything at all. She looked down at the table, and when she finally spoke, her voice was small. I thought I could keep everything in balance. There's no balance in deception, I said. There's just control. Her eyes snapped up, suddenly sharper. Defensive. Familiar. I was trying to reclaim my identity. I nodded. You've said that before. February 2nd. In a post titled Rewriting Monogamy. You said, and I quote, I'm no longer willing to be defined by someone else's version of commitment. You don't understand, she said, louder now. This wasn't about cheating. It was about growth. Growth? I repeated. You don't grow by manipulating the people who trust you. I didn't manipulate you. You wrote literal outlines, Madison. You used emotional framing to mask withdrawal. You treated our marriage like a controlled demolition. She closed her eyes, exhaling through her nose. You've clearly made up your mind. No, I said. You did. You made your mind up when you decided to split your life in two and hope I never looked closely enough to see the seams. The room was quiet for a long time. Then she said something I didn't expect. I thought you'd never find out. There it was. Honest. Blunt. Unfiltered. Not regretful, just factual. I nodded. I know. She finally drank the wine. Drained half the glass. Her hand was steady now. I guess I always thought you'd just let things slide. That you'd feel something was off, but you'd tell yourself it wasn't worth the fight. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I'm sorry, she said finally. I stared at her. No, you're not. You're just surprised the equation failed. She flinched at that. Not from the words, but from the precision of them. I never wanted it to end like this. I know. You didn't want it to end at all. You wanted both lives. And you wanted me to quietly anchor one of them. I stood. This is me cutting the line. She blinked. Wait, Mark, You don't need to explain anything else. I've seen the whole diagram. I'm done being part of your experiment. Where are you going? Somewhere quiet. Where people speak plainly. I left the folder on the table. I didn't take my wine. I didn't pack a bag. As I walked out the door, she didn't follow. For the first time, she had no script prepared for silence. After I walked out, I drove with no destination in mind. I just needed motion proof that I could still choose my direction. I ended up in a rented flat outside Flagstaff, a place with no shared memories and no Madison-shaped echoes. I didn't contact her. Didn't check in. Didn't respond to the 2-line texts she sent in the days that followed. Are you safe? Can we talk? They weren't questions. They were attempts to reset the stage. But I wasn't going back. Instead, I reached out to Marcus, a college friend who now worked in data security. He owed me a favor from a lifetime ago, and I cashed it in without hesitation. Marcus didn't ask many questions. I told him I needed help recovering data, old accounts, deleted messages, backup drives. I gave him access to Madison's cloud, which was still linked to the shared family tablet. Within a week, he handed me a digital archive that went deeper than anything I'd already found. Most of it was buried under benign file names, fitness PDFs, meal plans, vision board 2024. But inside were subfolders, hidden directories, discussions in encrypted chat rooms. And what I found wasn't just an affair. It was a curriculum. There were guides, PDFs, voice notes, even slide decks. Not from Madison alone, but from an entire online community. The forum was invitation-only, private, masked behind wellness and relationship jargon. Members shared strategies for managing what they called parallel partnerships. It wasn't cheating, they insisted, it was conscious divergence. Madison wasn't just a member. She was a mentor. In threads spanning back over a year, I found her username responding to new members, coaching them on how to avoid suspicion, how to frame disconnection as emotional healing, how to create airtight alibis. She shared scripts, templates, emotional exit strategies. One voice note was especially clear. She said, if you create enough softness, your partner won't press. They'll feel like questioning you is an attack on your healing. That's when you know you've secured the narrative. She knew exactly what she was doing. And worse, she had taught others how to do it too. I didn't retaliate in anger. I moved precisely. I mailed a curated copy of the evidence to her employer, discreetly, professionally. Just timestamps, **, TS, and voice logs. I didn't include a letter. I didn't have to. 2 days later, she stepped down from her role without fanfare. No goodbye post. No announcement. Just quiet removal. I deleted every shared account. Removed my name from the lease. Froze the joint savings. I changed my number. Deleted my socials. Moved out of state. I never confronted her again. There was no point. You don't plead with an architect about the building after the collapse. You just walk away from the ruins. Madison's reputation faded, not in flames, but in fog. People noticed her absence. They whispered, speculated. But she never got to control the story again. She'd built her identity like a mosaic, fragments of charm, intellect, warmth. But I'd seen the blueprint underneath. I knew where the cracks were hidden. I'd lived inside the illusion and walked out the other side. And the irony? She always thought I was too passive to act. She mistook my silence for weakness. But silence can be strategy. Stillness can be aim. When I disappeared, I didn't slam the door. I left it wide open behind me so she could see the emptiness she created. And then I let the echo do the rest.